right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 20th, 2015. And this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? Hope you remembered I moved the time. Yes, we got an hour later, which I don't know if it really helped much. I'm still really tired. But at least I got an extra half hour's worth of sleep. That was worth it. Um, and Mr. Hal Anthony now precedes us. So that was kind of a treat. I love listening to Hal, and I don't know if I can compete. It's always nicer when Hal's on after me, because then you're like, wow, it sounds like Hal's been listening to Jules' show. I always learn a lot, though, from Hal. And one of the things he was just talking about is the Ebola vaccine. How many times have I told you guys? And look, what I didn't realize is that yet again, and I guess it is pretty much across the board now, they got rid of any liability for them at all. We are just guinea pigs. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You know, they will be trying things on you and on our kids and our grandkids. And hey, plausible deniability, when your kid or grandkid gets sick, you know, blame it on the environment, blame it on the newest disease that's going around, or blame it on something else, but they're not going to blame it on the vaccine. Anyway, I don't know. You know, I was trying to think about what to do today, since we're going to go down to a skinny down format here for a little while and do an hour a day instead of two, thank God. And I don't know, there'll be days where I just have way too much to say, and then there will be days that I have nothing to say. Today is one of those days, not that I don't have anything to say, but it's just been a whirlwind. It was a long weekend. I am gamed out, I gotta tell you. I almost had my butt kicked by an 8-year-old playing Scrabble this weekend, which actually I have to feel kind of proud about that. But yeah, right down to the very last two plays. And had I not gotten the trifecta with a triple word score on the word quote, she would have won. So that was definitely a feather in her cap. But I have to say, a long weekend trying to be a homebody kind of burned me out. I'm pretty burned out now. So I'm just getting back into it. But I did try to keep up on all the news. I just don't know if there's anything that catches my attention. The WTF news tends to be more fun, as does the Before the First Cup news. That's all the spooky motion at a distance type stuff. Hey, one thing of note on a personal level, and I know how some people feel about TV. I haven't really watched anything in a really long time, but there are a few things that I'm excited about. And one is that Fox, yes, Fox News, but who gives a shit? Because Fox News may relaunch the X-Files with David Duchovny. Yes, that totally made my day. You guys don't even know. You know, I would go, God, I was back in college in those days and beyond after college. But we would go out Friday night. We'd usually, you know, by the time work finished, 5:30 or so. I mean, everyone would meet like right after. So by 9 o'clock, I'd always order myself a cheese sub on the way out the door, soak up the alcohol. My friends would hike with me, and it was like 3 blocks back to my place. Friday night at 8:45 p.m. to go watch the X-Files every Friday. So I'm very happy. I hope it comes back. It was a great show. I think there's a whole nother generation that deserves to see how awesome that show was. And still to this day, there are things that I think about that I saw in that show. We've talked about this on air. Like at the very end, I don't know, they were being traced by whatever government alphabet agency was trying to kill them. What member of the New World Order thought that they got too close to the truth, but they're running, and I remember they run across the train tracks, and it's all dark out, and they show up, and all there is this huge cornfield as far as the eyes can see. And remember, guys, this was back in the late 90s, so you know, this is before we knew about any of this stuff, but this cornfield, and they're running through the cornfield. And at the end, they get to this big, like, I don't even know what they call them, like a hangar type design of a large greenhouse. And that was where all the bees were in there and they were doing experiments. Well, I mean, here we go 10, 15 years later now. We look and you see all the stuff going on with Monsanto, GMO corn, and the bees. Where did that come from? How did they possibly know that? I'm telling you, at the end of that movie, and I was pretty conspiracy savvy back at that point, and I did not totally get that in any way, shape, or form. I didn't know what they were talking about, but here I am all these years later going, oh, the bees, the corn. And I was pretty dumb in those days. But that is about the time when nanotech and GMO they first started being dabbled with in the market. And I'm going to tell you, that's when I first started getting sick. Where I started having all those problems. I couldn't digest protein anymore. I started getting allergies to everything I ate. I mean, it was crazy. Just all kinds of weird, wacky food problems. And I had them for many years. No one knew where they came from. I went for all kinds of testing. And I'm telling you, it is the GMO. I am certain of it. As long as I stay away from any of that garbage, I'm fine. Experimentation on humans without our knowledge. What do you think of them apples? Um, all right. There were a few stories that came out that I thought were interesting, but they're not going to be current news. We're going to talk about some things that maybe were a little more disturbing. Out of one of my science magazines, Science Alert. Usually, it looks like they might have a U.S. site now, but they used to be like a sciencealert.au. They were Australian, but now it's sciencealert.com. There was a story that came out over the weekend that I thought was very pertinent to all of us, and we should be fully aware of this in case we ever get interrogated for one reason or another, innocent or guilty. We should all be cognizant of some of this research that's been done. Here's the title. People can be convinced they committed a non-existent crime in just 3 hours. What? Yeah. They can get you to admit to something that you didn't do in 3 hours. New research has shown that over the course of just a few hours, innocent adults can be convinced that they have committed a crime in their teenage years, some as serious as assault with a weapon, even if that crime was completely made up. And remember, as we have all of this financed research, much of it by DARPA, much of it by the federal government, being done in regards to the Brain Project. You have all these large corporations and organizations and government entities and hospitals and all working on this together. As they crack more secrets of the brain, we're going to be less safe. And I mean, there were a couple stories that I posted this weekend on Before the First Cup that had to do with some of the newest stuff on the brain. And I gotta tell you, it's pretty scary. The brain, Obama had, when they first announced the Brain Project, he's like, oh, this Brain Project is going to do for our economy what the Genome Project did for, the decade before. Well, I remember when they first started on the Genome Project, and I was really excited when they announced that they first cracked the genome and they first started sequencing. But I remember very quickly also realizing what a horrifying thought that was for the future. Just because you can file the books in a library and you can read all the titles now doesn't mean that the people who have access to the books in the library are going to be using them for good purposes, right? So, you can have an anarchist cookbook and you could just have some curious kid who wants to know about the anarchist cookbook, or you could have someone who wants to actually cook some anarchist cookbook recipes. It's 10 of one or 12 of one and half dozen of the other. No, 6 of one and half dozen of the other. That's what it is. Anyway, I don't think this brain project is going to be good for anybody. They're going to be able to flashlights, foo foo, and you won't even remember your name anymore. They'll be able to put these little implants in your brain. These new ones, actually, they can put in and they can do all kinds of imaging and watch how the brain's working with these implants in there. Pretty scary stuff. You know what? I don't want to become cyborg. Thank you very much. And I don't know too many people who would. And for those few who do want to become cyborgs, then great. You get on the next rocket ship to Mars, the Mars colony, then. That's where you belong, not here. I'd rather stay au naturel and sit here on polluted planet Earth and worry about cleaning it up here. Speaking of polluted, by the way, did you guys see? I mentioned it last night in chat for anyone who was around, but apparently there was an oil spill in Montana right into the Yellowstone River. 50,000 gallons of crude went into the river. I just saw before. It looks like they're really trying to work on that to get that cleaned up. But come on, I haven't been to Yellowstone yet. You can't ruin it. I wanted to go whitewater rafting there someday. That's pretty horrifying. Why? I guess there was a broken pipeline, so we got pipelines running across Yellowstone. I don't know. I was too disgusted to read too much, but maybe we'll look at that further along in the show. All right, let's go back to this. People can be convinced that they committed a non-existent crime in 3 hours. Innocent people can be questioned by police in such a way that they end up convincing themselves that they've committed a crime. And this belief can be so strong that they can sometimes follow that belief up with a false confession. Da, 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 surprise. How many innocent people have died in prison? I mean, even on death row, of people who have been convicted of crimes they didn't commit. And a lot of these people, especially the ones who spent 20 years and finally were exonerated by a DNA test or something, then they come out. I just saw one not too long ago. Then they come out and they go, yeah, they forced me to confess to the crime. They beat the crap out of them and say, confess or we'll kill you. What are you going to do? Confess or we'll kill your children. What are you going to do? Speaking of the confess and will kill your children, we should look at that, the director from Gray State. I read a little bit more about that. Mike dropped a video. And you know what, Mike? I did not get to watch it with sound, but I did watch it without sound. I watched the whole thing. And that was pretty interesting. The fact that Gray State director, supposedly there was a murder-suicide at his home. I read a few more details yesterday. The neighbor alerted police. Neighbor said that no one had been seen in or out of the house since Christmas over there. This was in Minnesota, I believe. And there were packages all piling up on the front porch. And the neighbor went over there and happened to see all the bodies on the floor through the window and called the police. And there was a dog that was still alive in the house, which doesn't sound pleasant. But what was kind of suspect about this whole case is that, the Gray State movie was going to be about the coming police state and FEMA camps and takeovers and whatever. And I was really looking forward to that movie. I mean, we've been waiting for that for a couple years now. We've seen a few trailers and they did some fundraising and a few advertising bursts. But what I didn't know about the director is that, and this is the movie, the clip that Mike dropped yesterday in chat, is that the director actually ran his own company for training like crisis actors, training military. Actually, it was military and police tactics, guns, shooting, holding for movies, for actors. And it looked pretty interesting. I mean, actually, I watched that whole 10 minutes, and some of those guys did great, like especially from the beginning. By the end, he whipped them really into shape. But yeah, that would be an interesting connection. He definitely would know some of the inside. If some of these were, how everyone always jumps on it and says it's a false flag and they were actors, I'm not going there. But if they do happen to use Christ as actors in some of these false flags that happen, then yeah, he probably would have had an inside scoop. I don't know. This is all just conjecture, but I guess I definitely found the points that were apparent there and that connected together. Somewhat interesting. I feel really horrible. There was this little kid, his wife, and himself. And from people that are Facebook friends of mine that I know through the radio who were personal friends with him, they were really great people too. So I don't know. I feel very sad. I hope they catch who did it. I hope more comes out and we discover that it was some sort of government plot and we bust them all. But very suspicious death. I'm sure we're going to find out it was some ninja assassin that came at Christmas Eve. Like, what? That's really horrific. They haven't been seen since Christmas. What an awful thought. But remember, we all need to have situational awareness because if that wasn't a sign to shut up, I don't know what is. All right, here we're going to go back now to this making you confess to something you didn't do. Early last year, a team of lawyers and statisticians published a paper stating that 4.1% of criminal defendants who are sentenced to death in the U.S. are falsely convicted. Well, there you go. To investigate this phenomenon, a study led by psychologist scientist Julie Shaw from the University of Bedfordshire in the UK investigated the possible cause and found that, if questioned in the right way, innocent people can fabricate stories in their mind with so much detail that they can falsely convince themselves that they committed a crime. Quote, our findings show the false memories of committing a crime with police contact can be surprisingly easy to generate and can have all the same kinds of complex details as real memories, Shaw said in a press release. As participants, all participants need to generate a richly detailed false memory is 3 hours in a friendly interview environment where the interviewer introduces a few wrong details and uses poor memory retrieval techniques. Shaw and her colleague, forensic psychologist Stephen Porter from the University of British Columbia in Canada, started by recruiting 60 university students who had not been involved in any crimes. The researchers then asked their primary caregivers to fill out a questionnaire relating to specific events these students could have experienced between the ages of 11 and 14, and were also asked to elaborate as much as their memories would permit. These questions were kept secret from the students. Next, the students were brought into a lab to undergo 3 40-minute interviews stretched over a 3-week period. During the first interview, the researchers briefly described 2 events to each of the students. One that the student had experienced in their teenage years, the details which were given by the caregiver, and one that was false, never actually happening. Half of these false events involved a crime that came to the attention of the police, such as an assault with a weapon, or a theft. The other 50% included a fake dog attack or some kind of other injury or a loss of a huge sum of money. These events never actually happened, but the researchers peppered their descriptions with enough true details of the student's time as a teenager, such as the name of a friend at that point in their lives, to make them sound convincing. The students were asked again to explain what happened to them during each of these events, and naturally they struggled to recall the details of the false events, but were encouraged to keep trying, and the researchers suggested they try various memory strategies to help them quote unquote remember. During the second and third interviews in the following weeks, the students were once again asked to recall what happened during both the true and the false events. And as they were describing certain features of their memories, they were asked to state how vivid those memories are and how confident they are that those were the truth. Publishing the results in the Journal of Psychological Science, Shaw and Porter found that of 30 students who were told they committed a crime in their teenage years, 21, I don't know what this means, 21 dash, so 71%. I don't know. Oh, 21 of them. So 71% of the respondents ended up developing a false memory of the event taking place. Of the 20 who were told they committed some kind of assault, either with or without a weapon, 11 were able to describe in incredible detail their interaction with the police on the matter, an event that never happened. Wow. Now, I'm gonna I'm gonna actually I was remembering something as I was reading this. There are incidences, and I'm sure we all have them in different time periods of our lives where things are probably really hazy. And I'm talking God, there were a lot of years there in the early to mid 90s, I'd have to say. After I was out of college, I had just got my first real job. I actually, by that point, I was living by myself. Heidi lived around the corner, so we were trouble. And yeah, we had lots of friends. We did lots of stuff. I did my cross country trip. Um, oh my God, we used to go to New York City. We would take, they had the $99 round trip flight and bring your friend for a penny deals at that time. So Heidi and I went to New York a whole bunch of times to go hang out and party because my sister was still in college there. And yeah, so there were definitely some hazy years. But I'm going to tell you the one night Heidi and I were talking, and I brought up some event that had happened when we were out in New York the one time. And she continued, and she's like, "Oh yeah, and don't you remember, blah 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 blah, and the crazy guy was chasing us, and blah 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 blah." And I was like, "No, don't you remember like the gunshot and the guy was laying on the ground, shot, going, help me, I'm shot." And I'm like, "No." I mean, there were memories, and I'll tell you, after we talked about it more, it started to really come back to me. But there were definite memories that were just like gone. Absolutely gone. But the weirdest part is that then I did the same thing to her. I was like, "Well, don't you remember, when we blah 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 blah?" And she's like, "No." And I'm like, "But come on, and we did blah 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 blah." No. Oh, you can't remember. And she's like, "Oh, maybe." Like, it's just so weird in the last 20 years. I don't think I'm getting Alzheimer's, I hope. But you got to figure in the last 20 years, just with all the things that have happened and all the things that we've learned and all the things that we've seen, some of those insignificant events must just kind of get filed into the unimportant bin or something, and they fade after a while. And those were some of the most awesome, crazy times back then. So I find it hard to believe that I've forgotten some of them, but I absolutely forgot the crazy guy on the fire escape screaming he was going to chop me into little pieces in New York after we'd all been out drinking. I didn't do anything. He started talking to me. I totally forgot about that crazy. But how did I forget about that? And it was even traumatic to boot. We had to run. There's a group of like 10 of us all running from this psychopath. And I don't know how that happened, but it did. So I would have to say that if it's that easy to forget about things like that, it also would be that easy to implant memories like that. And I could see how they did it. Once had Heidi told me that, we saw kitty cats raining from the sky and went on and gave me all the details and talked about it, and then had someone else corroborate it to boot, like my sister, I probably would have believed them. All right. And here's the one thing too that I didn't see them talking about in here, but makes you wonder what kind of a statistical difference you have from getting memories from like a research situation versus someone who is in your trusted circle. You know, if one of your close family members tells you something had happened, you're probably going to be more apt to believe them than someone in a white coat. At least I would. But if you believe that someone in the white coat is above, all wrongdoing and is a trusted advisor, then, it might be much easier. But for those of us with suspicious personalities, I know that wouldn't work for me. All right, so let's read the very last of this. Similarly, 76.6% of the 30 students who were fed false stories about their teenage years that weren't of a criminal nature ended up forming false memories about them too. 76.6%. That's crazy. And that's the ones false memories without crime in them. 71% for false memories with crime in them, including assault with or without a weapon. That's insane. The researchers report that when they compared the false stories, the false crime memories ended up just as detailed as the false emotional memories, right down to similar ratings of confidence, vividness, and sensory detail as determined by the students. It was those small, true details that convinced the students of a much bigger lie. So, you know, let's put on our thinking caps and think about what this research is telling us. Because if they start giving details and they start spinning this tall yarn and then they keep telling you about it, and it only took 3 sessions, everybody begins to believe it. Now, where have we seen that before? Huh. Oh, what? George Bush? George Bush standing up there deciding it was Saddam Hussein who was responsible for 9/11? Yes. Yes, yes. 9/11. And the whole war on terror has been a big spinning of a yarn, of a web of lies that they have convinced the unaware public is all true. Oh, what? History? All of history? Yes, they've done that to all of history, too. They have taken true facts and made us forget them and have spun the facts the way they want us to remember them. This is a pretty scary thing that in such a short period of time that they can convince people of false facts and get them to fully believe it, and not only believe it, but to remember it with all kinds of realism. It's very nutty. All right. Well, how much more did we read? It was very close to the bottom here. The researchers say that what they found could have huge implications for the criminal justice system when it comes to recording suspect and witness testimonies. And all those serial fans out there, I don't know what serial is, but it's italicized, so I'm assuming that it's a show, understand the weight a witness testimony can carry with the jury and the judge providing over a case that's lacking in physical evidence. Quote, understanding that these false, complex memories exist and that normal individuals, quote, unquote, it says normal individuals can be led to generate them quite easily. It is the first step in preventing them from happening. Yeah. Or understanding how they work is the first step in making them work better. Quote, by empirically demonstrating the harm bad interview techniques, which are those which are known to create false memories, can cause, we can more readily convince interviewers to avoid them and use good techniques instead. Yes, or show the interrogators how to exactly get you to spit out a false confession. This is very upsetting. Very upsetting. Because don't think that this isn't something that they've known about for a long time and as part of this brain research. I mean, they could get us to believe anything. You know, they're actually learning how to insert and delete memories and manipulate memories. Guys, once we've reached that point, it's game over. Because all you got is what's in your head. Once that's gone, once you have a traumatic brain injury, you're not you anymore. It's not there. And it might be somewhere in the inside, but you don't have your cognitive abilities. Your cognitive abilities are your weapon. To be able to see beyond the bullshit as to what's really going on is the weapon. And if they've learned to circumvent our ability to reason properly, well, we got another thing coming. So anyway, I will drop this in chat. Yeah, this is an Australian. I thought it used to be sciencealert.au because down at the very bottom it has University of Wollongong, Wollongong, Australia. I love their names. Actually, here's one other one. I wonder if I can click on this. Read more. This is a great publication too, by the way. If any of you guys are into like science or archaeology or weird things, there were a few good stories from yesterday. This one, actually, I'd like to read because curcumin has my heart. Curry ingredient curcumin found to suppress traumatic memories. Now, this should be interesting. Oh, no. They're going to use curcumin against us. Yes, they're suggesting that maybe it could be a good treatment for PTSD. I would much rather be using PTSD than DARPA researched memory wipes, my personal opinion. But yeah, the story underneath this one, just to give you a taste of the type of stories that are in here, ancient biblical text discovered in an ancient Egyptian mummy mask. I saw that just as I woke up. It was supposedly a fragment of the Gospel of Mark, and it is one of the earliest fragments of it, and it's inside of an Egyptian mummy mask. So that was kind of weird. And then, yes, the one I found last night, a huge infographic on everything that could wipe out humanity ranked in one handy chart. You know I had to love that one. Okay, so for the first time, scientists have found that an active ingredient in curries can impair the information or the formation and storage of fear-related memories in mice, suggesting that it could be used to treat PTSD in humans. A new study involving lab animals has found that curcumin, the naturally occurring bright yellow compound used in curries, can actively impair the formation of fear-related memories in the brain, making it an intriguing new candidate for possible treatments for psychological disorders such as PTSD. Extracted from the root of the turmeric plant, a species native to southeastern India and related to ginger, and yes, it is in the same family, curcumin has been used as a food additive and dye by Indian and Eastern Asian cultures for many hundreds of years. I would even say probably close to thousands. And studies suggest that it doesn't just offer a distinct, slightly bitter, peppery taste. Preclinical research has found that it could also have several beneficial effects on the body, including anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and neuroprotective properties as well, which means it actively preserves the structure or function of your neurons. We've also looked, I mean, there's over 1,100 studies on that greenmed.info, I think is the name of the website, that from all over the world that have been done on curcumin and the curing of different cancers. It actually causes apoptosis of the cancer cells, cuts off the blood supply, and the tumors die. And for anyone who hasn't read about curcumin or turmeric, I highly recommend that you do. You would be very, very surprised. It causes the liver to regenerate itself. It'll help with any what do you call it? Arthritises that you have, or crunchy joints, or achy backs, or like even when I get major like allergy attacks, I have a couple super concentrations of curcumin here in the enteric form, so it passes through your digestive system before it's released, so it gets right in your small intestine. And I mean, that stuff works amazingly. I don't know. To me, it's a cure-all. I take it every day. Anyway, the compound is being studied also as a potential treatment from everything from cancer to Alzheimer's disease to arthritis and heart disease. And now researchers are suggesting that it could also be used to treat people living with post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD. This debilitating disorder currently affects as many as 8% of the U.S. population. Yes, with the returning military personnel being particularly susceptible. But I got to tell you, I'm sure a lot of us have PTSD after 9/11. I know I did. I mean, PTSD causes a, what would you call it? Almost like a trained reaction after the fact. You know, you have a soldier who went to war and had some horrific event. Like one of my friends that I know, where the little 8-year-old or 5-year-old came into the Marine base strapped with bombs and was getting ready to ignite, and the entire troop would have been destroyed. And so the only choice was to shoot the suicide bomber. And he never got over that. I mean, he's still messed up over that. And I couldn't imagine. I mean, that's just one example of all the horrific things that could happen in times of war or not, perpetual war that we wage. You know, I don't know. There's a couple ways that you could go. You could either go with it. So some of those evil fuckers that were pissing on corpses in Iraq, and those guys probably will never be bothered. I hope they will, but they probably never will be. But then you have the other who, especially people who have their own children or people who have a conscience and a soul who realize it's too late after they get there that this isn't what we should be doing and this is going to haunt them for the rest of their lives. So I'm really glad that maybe they found something that isn't a pharmaceutical. I know Dinah had been doing her own tests, and actually, she had that test. I know she'd been working on trying to get the federal government to recognize her testing on cannabis oil and cannabinoids for PTSD. She had an entire nationwide network of vets that she was working with, trying to help them with their issues. And one of the big deals were that the feds wouldn't recognize it because it was an illegal substance. Now, I had seen just recently, I believe, that they had been working with cannabinoids and PTSD, but I don't remember if they were doing it with, organic cannabinoids or if we were looking at something like that Sativex, which, they say is natural, but who the hell knows what they're doing to it or putting in it. All right. So let's go back to the story. The only medications right now that have made it to market for PTSD are antidepressants and sedatives. Yes, which I'm sure the story won't come out and call it the way it is. It says which can effectively mask the pain, but don't get to the heart of the disorder. Well, remember, guys, we've seen so much, especially with the combination of glyphosate and the suppression of the cytochrome P450 enzyme, and then what happens when you take one of those SSRIs, okay, that turns you into a lunatic and you start killing people a lot of times. And that's definitely not what we want, but that is probably what they want. That's why any of these alternative therapies have probably been shunned for a long time. And, in almost every single one of these cases over the last 3 or 4 years that we've looked at where we've had a shooter that's gone in or a hostage situation, many, many, many times we have discovered after the fact that, yes, they are on SSRIs and they suffer from PTSD. And remember, now that is one of the steps that they are using. And I think they did it in New York. Yeah, we talked about that. There was the gentleman out of, I think he was out of New Jersey, and he moved into, maybe he was out of New York City, somewhere in there, but he was in New York. And he went to a doctor after he had moved and said that he was having trouble sleeping. There was a lot of stress in his life. Everything was changing. He'd moved like 600 miles away. And the doctor put in the records that he was depressed. And the next thing you know, the cops are taking his gun. And he wasn't depressed. He just was having trouble sleeping. But, the next step to that was PTSD. And they've been going after people who have been to see psychiatrists. So, this is not something that I think anybody, even if you had any type of depressive disorder or psychological depression because of something that you've seen, I mean, right now's the time to keep your mouth shut about any of that stuff. This is not something to go feeding more information into the system, especially as they go on to electronic records. Obama last summer in his 43 executive actions had dubbed psychiatrists as like the first rung of the ladder for keeping an eye on these things. And I mean, your doctor now asks all kinds of crazy questions. You know what? False memories, people. That's all I got to say. Until they make it illegal to lie to your doctor, I'm going to make shit up. I'm going to confuse the machine. And I don't even go. But if I have to go, I'm going to make it up. So, anyway, I didn't say that, though. You didn't hear me say that. So, yeah, they've been giving him depressants and sedatives, which can effectively mask the pain, but they don't get to the heart of the problem, which is how fear-related memories are formed and stored in the brain. And yes, we've dug into that. That's something that DARPA is studying very, very deeply. Fear-related memories and how they're stored and, removed? Yes, removed and replaced. Research has also found that for up to 50% of the patients who've been prescribed Antidepressants and sedatives, they don't actually work. So the race is on to find something else to treat PTSD. Yes, DARPA's spending millions. And psychologists at the City University of New York in the U.S. have been focusing on the potential of curcumin to do just that. Well, that's surprising. I wonder if they're ever going to let these studies really get out, since DARPA's got implants to fix this. Why would you want to use a natural root when you could get an implant? They picked the popular route because it has already been shown to reduce the symptoms of depression in both lab animals and people. And yes, I've actually read a bunch of research where they've shown it when people start suffering from Alzheimer's. And we're going to talk about this because I know I've talked about Alzheimer's and mad cow, Khrushchev's Jacobs CJVD, Khrushchev's Jacobs, whatever it's called, CVJD, I think it is, which is the human form of man cow. How they all seem to be related. Well, there are a couple studies out there now that kind of back what I was believing for a long time, that they are very related. So we'll look at that. I was scrolling through that yesterday, and I was planning on talking about it today. But hey, guess what? We're down to the last 15 minutes of the show, if you can believe it. I can ramble for a long time. Anyway, they had found that curcumin is very effective for people who are starting to have memory issues in the brain, and they think that some of it can be attributed to the fact that it helps reduce inflammation. It helps increase blood flow, and they even think that it helps neurons regrow. So, I would say stroke patients, that would probably be a good remedy. I mean, there's, knock on wood, but there is nothing bad that I've seen yet about curcumin. And the one thing to be aware of, it does thin your blood. So if you're on some sort of blood thinners, and it makes it more difficult to clot, if you're on some sort of blood thinners, you might want to be careful because you don't want to stroke out or have like a bleeding disorder. But on the other hand, if you do a lot of sitting, if you smoke, if you have a high platelet count, and there are many of us who do, curcumin will help keep your blood thin. They used to tell you to take a baby aspirin a day in 81 milligram. That's what my doctor used to tell me. He's like, I recommend that to all my patients, just to keep the blood flowing and whatever. I actually just saw a study the other day. Now they're recommending you don't take aspirin every day. Well, hey, just take some curcumin. You can get it in pill form, or you can get it in natural form. You can get it in root. You can get it in the store. I use it in tacos and freaking stews and everything. It's delicious. And if you want to superpower it, put what they call the name in the bottle. You'll see it called Pepperline, but it really is just fresh cracked pepper. Fresh cracked pepper fires up curcumin. I don't know. I've seen a couple conflicting amounts, but anywhere from 100 to 500 times more powerful in the protection category. I don't see anything bad about it. And you know what? If there's anyone who knows how to live a long time, it definitely is the Indians and the Asians. They live to be really old, and they tend to be much healthier than us, despite the fact that they live in horrific environmental conditions over there. I would have to say that if there was, and they call that the God spice too, by the way. But if there was one thing on earth that if I had to pick it for my nutrition, and that's all I could take, it probably would be curcumin. I could probably find the other stuff in nature somewhere for all my vitamins, but curcumin is it's a miracle. It really does. So, every time I read more about it, it's got some new thing that it cures or fixes or whatever. It's pretty amazing. All right. So let's see. We're shocking rats, and we're seeing what their Pavlovian conditioning does. Team led by psychologist Glenn E. Schaaf uses a widely studied animal model of traumatic memory formation. Yes, called the Pavlovian fear conditioning, and that's what they do to us, by the way. So you know what? Maybe our curcumin ingestion will help us not be as easily controlled by them. Think about that. Yes, so called the Pavlovian fear conditioning to test the effects of curcumin. The Pavlovian fear conditioning model involves creating a negative association in an animal's memory with a particular object, place, smell, or sound. For example, you inflict a mild electric shock on a rat every time it explores a designated corner of its enclosure, and pretty soon it's going to start avoiding that spot like the plague. The team's rats were split into 3 groups. 2 got regular food. The third got food made with 1.5% of curcumin added. The curcumin group ended up eating about 270 milligrams of the colorful extract each day on average. 250 milligrams, though, compared to their body size. I think I take 1,000 per pill, and I take 2. So I think I'm taking 2,000 milligrams of curcumin. 5 days later, the fear conditioning began, and of the 2 groups fed on normal food, one was subjected to fear conditioning, the other was not, so it could remain a control group. The first experiment involved studying the effects of curcumin on the actual physical structure of the rats' brains. The team found that the spice was making its way to the lateral amygdala. It's not an amblygata, it's an amygdala region in the brain, which is said to be the essential place for fear memory storage, in high enough amounts to actively stop the formation of these memories from being completed. Let's read that again. The team found that the spice was making its way to the region of the brain, the lateral amygdala, which is said to be an essential place for fear memory storage in high enough amounts to actively stop the formation of these memories from being completed. Wow. Start dosing on your curcumin. This is going to be the fight back spice. Wow. That's pretty interesting. The second experiment backed up this find as curcumin appeared to mess with the fear conditioning process. Oh, no. You better, you know what? When I was looking for 50-pound buckets of organic curcumin, and my mother's like, oh, it won't last that long, I might actually go looking for 50-pound buckets of organic curcumin again. They're going to make this stuff go away. If this helps mess with the fear conditioning, they've been practicing that for a long time. That's the control mechanism. The rats were conditioned to be frightened of a particular sound, because every time they heard it, they received an electric shock. Once the conditioning process was over, the model states that the rats will only have to hear the sound to make them freeze in fear long after the shocks have stopped. The team found this to be true in the rats that fed on the regular chow, but the rats on the curcumin diet, they did not freeze in fear following the conditioning experiment. The researchers report in the paper published in Neuropsychopharmacology, which must be a publication, quote, the curcumin-enriched diet was observed to effectively impair the reconsolidation of both recently formed within 24 hours as well as an older, well-consolidated within 2-week fear memory, suggesting that even older fear memories are susceptible to reconsolidation impairment using this compound. Oh, this would totally gum up their nasty works now, wouldn't it? This latter finding adds to a growing body of evidence that amygdala-dependent memories are susceptible to reconsolidation interference regardless of their age, and has important implications for the use of reconsolidation-based approaches in a clinical setting, given that many patients may not seek help immediately following a traumatic experience. Finally, and perhaps most important from a clinical perspective, we show that fear memories that fail to reconsolidate under the influence of dietary curcumin are impaired in an enduring manner We found no evidence that they are subject to reinstatement following an unsignaled foot shock or to renew following a shift in testing context, both of which are trademark characteristics of fear memories that are lost due to fear extinction procedures. Of course, rat brains are very different from humans, so we can't jump to any conclusions just yet, but it sure is an intriguing result. Yeah, it is sure an intriguing result. One thing's for sure, if the body of research surrounding curcumin can tell us anything, it's that it's probably better to have this humble yellow spice in your life than not. And yes, that is true. Here, I'll drop. That's the committing the crime one. And then just below that, you can find that curcumin suppressing traumatic memories. And below that, you can find the ancient biblical text discovered in the Egyptian mummy mask. It really is a nice publication. I always find interesting stories in there. So, oh man, we got 5 minutes left. Yeah, we took this down to an hour for now. So I literally can get some stuff done. One of the things that I want to work on is getting this back in automation up to its next level so I can be freed from the majority of my daily grind to do other things. But that's good. You know what? We got Hale on in the morning. I'll have to figure out too. Hale's probably going to play. Well, I got today's Kevin, so I'll have to figure out for Monday, Wednesday, Friday what we're going to run, because Hale was scheduled to run, so we'll have to put something else in there so we don't have double Hale. Though I could have a Hale sandwich. All right, where do we go? I did see a couple messed up stories yesterday. The Pope says good Catholics don't need to breed like rabbits. That is on my WTF page. Yeah, yay. Go Pope. You think they would have figured that one out a long time ago. ISIS executes 13 football fans by firing squad for watching Iraq play Jordan on TV. That's a good one. I didn't know they actually had TV there. But I guess they must in some of the areas. Oh, let's see. I don't want to waste it. We got 5 whole minutes. Let's find a good story. I don't know. These are all just pretty crazy. Crazy stories. Yeah, I don't know. None of those are good. It's hard, guys. I'm still trying to recover after the holidays. Trust me. Oh, I hope some of you got to watch the Venture Brothers special yesterday. I did DVR that, so that's one of the things that I'm planning on checking out. Oh, here we go. Yeah, I'm actually out of time now, so I'm not going to be able to read this today. But maybe we can look at this tomorrow. I found a story. It's actually from 2013, but Discover Magazine was always one of my favorite magazines ever. It's where I thought as soon as I got out of college with my writing degree that they were going to hire me immediately because I wanted to write for them. Of course, they never responded to my resume or anything. That's when I realized that a degree doesn't mean anything and nobody cares. But I do want to write for them. But they're still a good magazine. The story was titled, Grandma's Experiences Leave a Mark on Your Genes. Your ancestors' lousy childhoods or excellent adventures might change a personality, bequeathing anxiety or resilience by altering the epigenetic expressions of genes in the brain. And what's so interesting about that, and maybe we can read about this tomorrow, is that they have found that there are gene memories that can be passed down that don't change the DNA at all. They actually change some of the chemical expressions in the gene itself, and those chemical expressions then are passed down through the genes. And definitely a different way of looking at things, because before they only thought that it was purely genetic DNA mutations and modifications, but it isn't. It isn't. It's way more than that. So It's a pretty interesting take on things. There was a lot of research done into that. And here, I'm going to drop this. This is, oh, maybe it'll show. Yeah, there we go. It's an infographic to that about epigenetics, but it's definitely interesting, and we could take a look at that, and it might explain a lot. And when you start looking into things like GMOs and the damage that they're doing and vaccinations, it makes you wonder if there isn't something more going on just beyond changes that they've made to the body, let's say. I don't know. I'll have to put on my thinking cap and really think about that one because it was a big article. And if you want, let me actually drop the whole article and we can all do our homework for tomorrow. And, if you guys want to chime in, you can. But I was very intrigued. The story itself was excellent. I really think, it's not bringing it up now. I really think that it would give you some good food for thought. Oh, look at that. The computer just stopped going anywhere. Well, maybe I can snag the link at least. I think that's it. I hope. Pretty sure, but I don't know. It won't go anywhere now. Oh, and it is 10:58, people. I'm down to the last minute. So, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the shortened Tuesday edition of Before the First Cup. Make sure you stick around. Mr. Kevin Blanche is up live next, and it is Tuesday night. So there are lots of live shows on tonight. We got Primer Time. We got Purple Chicks After Dark. We got Anti-Media Radio. Mr. Jack Blood is on live at 3 p.m. simulcasting. And we got Mr. Chuck Ochelli at 6 p.m. Eastern. So good night of radio, always on Tuesday. So make sure you have an awesome day. Come back tomorrow if you can. I'll figure out what we'll put on after the show Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. I'll have to take a look at that tonight, and I'll surprise you in the morning. All right, guys. Everyone have an awesome Tuesday. I will see you guys later. I'll be hanging around and chat. Take care.